pizza in Rome, pizza in Naples, pizza in Sicily, and pizza in New York. This week, it's all about pizza.
Traveling the world to bring you delicious dishes, tasty beverages, and interesting experiences. This is the Destination Eat Drink Podcast on the Radio Misfits Podcast Network.
I'm Brent Peterson. Welcome to Destination Eat Drink, the travel podcast for foodies. Destination Eat Drink is for foodies who love to travel and travelers who love to eat. And this week, we're sampling the most popular food in the world, pizza, not only from Italy, but also from New York City and a little sidebar in Chicago as well. But first, if you like the podcast, please share it with your friends and social media. It really helps me get the word out. And if you can, please consider a one-time or recurring contribution to Destination Eat Drink in any amount at buymeacoffee.com/Destination Eat Drink. And thank you very, very much. This week, we're finding out about all the different kinds of pizza in Rome, in Naples, in Sicily, and why New York City isn't really a pizza style. Pizza, pizza, pizza. I'm starving for pizza. Let's have a slice. Let's eat.
Destination Eat Drink.
Katie Parla is a New York Times best-selling author, TV personality, podcaster, and tour guide based in Rome. She shares her expertise about the pizza of her adopted city. I want to talk about pizza because depending on where you go, I just talked to someone from Naples, and we did an episode about pizza in Naples. Wherever you go in Italy, the pizza might be completely different. The pizza in Naples is different than the pizza in Sicily. Roman pizza is its own thing, not completely, but different than the other kinds of pizza. And I think Roman pizza might be lesser known than some of these other kinds of pizza that we can get in Italy. So maybe talk about what is Roman pizza and how can we enjoy it when we're in the city?
Roman pizza really falls into two categories with three styles, for lack of a better term. So you've got your personal round pizza. That's roughly the same diameter as a Neapolitan pie, but it is stretched or rolled very thin, so it has almost no rim, and it's a bit crispy. So very, very different than the texture of Naples pizza. That you can eat at a wide array of places. I really like Dal Remo in Testaccio and Ai Marmi. There's also a place in Centocelle called 180 grams Pizzeria Romana, and they do something that's a little bit more substantial. So not the super wafer thin, but a slightly thicker crust using 180 grams of dough instead of the sort of traditional 110 to 120. And then the other category is pizza by the slice, and that falls into two separate incarnations. You can either go to a place like Pizzarium and get pizza by the slice cut in rectangular pieces from a sheet pan.
Right.
Or you can go to a bakery and have pizza by the slice cut from a long oblong slab that's not cooked in any pan at all. It's cooked directly on the oven deck. And you can get pizza alla palla, which is the oblong bakery style, from whenever bakeries open, which is not quite as early as they do elsewhere. And the pizza by the slice cooked in the sheet pan or pizza in teglia is instead available from lunchtime to dinner time. And then at dinner time, that's traditionally when you get the round pizza, the thin crust Roman pizza. So you can basically have pizza for breakfast, lunch, and dinner and be covered.
And that's not a bad thing. My favorite thing to do is at lunchtime, go get one of these slabs of rectangular pizza, because you've got all the Roman office workers who are going into these places and they're getting their lunch, and it's a very evocative atmosphere and a lot of fun. And where are some of your favorite places to go to get these slabs of pizza at lunchtime, Katie?
I go to the same places all the time. I go to Antico Forno Roscioli and Forno Campo dei Fiori. Those are right in the center of town, which, typically most cities don't have a plethora of awesome places to eat right in the center.
Right.
But in Rome, a lot of the cafes and bakeries are awesome because they don't exist for tourists. They exist to feed office workers and bureaucrats and people who have quick lunch breaks and meager stipends, or are just after something really delicious. So those are great spots to check out.
Katie Parla was also on the podcast talking about her book, The Joy of Pizza and the Marketing Scam of 00 Flour. You see this with lots of other foods and drinks as well. Wine comes to mind immediately. It's like if it doesn't fit into this exact category, then it somehow becomes excluded, even though it might be incredibly interesting and delicious and fascinating and something you want to try.
Totally. And dogma doesn't necessarily equate to quality because, and this is also like wine's a great analogy, a wine could adhere to all of the rules and regulations and production zones required by the appellation, but it could also be like really bad. And the outcome, the sort of result, is not something that's judged. It's the process. Like Neapolitan style, in order to be a Neapolitan pizza, like officially certified, the pizzaiolo has to have a specific training, use certain flours, like 00 flour, which actually is like big marketing scam, has to use San Marzano tomatoes, which, like, no surprise to anyone who follows like food fraud in
Yes.
on the globe, not enough San Marzano tomatoes to supply the demand. So guess what? There's a lot of like illegality in that field. And so I could I think write a book about how following the Neapolitan style could lead you astray and actually prevent you from making great pizza. That said, there's some great Neapolitan pizza makers. Shout out to Attilio in Naples, Giro Salvo, Enzo Colcia. But I think generally speaking, the Neapolitan style could be a lot better all over the world.
A lot of stuff to unpack with that, with what you just talked about, Katie. But I think the first thing I want to ask you about is why no 00 flour? Because that's been indoctrinated into our brains now. You see so many pizza places coming in saying 00 flour, 00 flour over and over again. And now it's like it becomes sort of a mantra. Why are you against 00 flour?
Well, 00 flour is an Italian flour. Footnote. The 00 is a method of nomenclature used in Italy to express like the most highly refined flour. So it's like the one with the least nutrition. It's milled the finest. And that's what 00 means. 00 flour, because of its complete absence of identity, it's pure milled endosperm, can't give you a sense of terroir. It can give you like the high protein that you're looking for if you're making certain pizza styles, for sure. But because Italy historically has not grown enough grain to supply its demand, a lot of that grain's traveling from all over the world, landing in Italy, getting milled, getting bagged up, and then being sent back to where it grew in the first place. Like a lot of the wheat in Italian bags of flour is actually from the US or Canada. And I think I'm going to speak to a US audience. That's certainly the audience for The Joy of Pizza. There are some incredible flour companies in the US doing things that are, not expensive. They're super affordable. They're milled to the same specs year in and year out. So you can have a really consistent product without having to buy into the marketing that Caputo and other companies have really sort of dominated the field with.
So if I hear you, Katie, from what you're saying, 00 flour is basically the Wonder Bread of flours.
And listen, I love a Wonder Bread. One of my favorite sandwiches is the tramezzino in Italy with like tuna salad and egg. We eat it on basically Wonder Bread with the crust cut off. Wonder Bread is super consistent. It lacks nutrition. And I think if you're trying to make a really delicious pizza, if the base is made with something totally inert, then it's probably not going to be as good as it could be unless you're a complete master and use fermentation and all sorts of things to tease out the best flavor profile. But I would say if you're shopping in North America, ditch the 00, use bread flour or even all-purpose flour. It's going to have the protein quantity necessary for creating a really good base, especially for the 5 doughs in the Joy of Pizza. And then the 5 doughs in the book start out with like super simple, like white flour, and then work up to more heirloom wheats, different types of bran inclusion. So you got to learn like the kind of refined flour Wonder Bread stuff first before you move up to the more complex, like sourdough style baking.
Marco Scapagnini is the founder of Niche Italy, a tour company that takes visitors who love food all over the boot. He talks about the pizza from Sicily.
Sfincione is a way of making something. There is the sfincione, it's like technically it's a sfincione focaccia sfincionata. Sfinciuni means with anchovies, technically, because the original recipe is with this tomato sauce, onion, and anchovies and breadcrumb, which is the topping of the focaccia. If you move like 10 miles east, you arrive in Bagheria, which is a little town by the sea close to Palermo, and they do the sfinciuni bagherisi, which is a completely different, no tomato sauce. There are the anchovies, but is a white sauce, and they also put other spices. So even inside the Palermo metropolitan area, you can find different kind of sfincioni. This is something that if you go to the Mercato del Capo, there are these vendors that are cutting the sfincione in front of you, and you can buy for like a big slice for €1, €1.50, and or you have to go to the traditional bakeries that are making the sfincione. Then you can have some seafood like the capone, which is a winter kind of seafood. They do in the oven, and they call capone sfincionato because they open in two. This seafood is like the mahi-mahi in terms of taste.
Okay.
And they do the same topping of the focaccia sfincione, and they put in the oven, and they do the capone sfincionato, which I love, technically.
And these are great to get with street vendors and whatnot. I find the crust to be more spongy, I think, maybe because the tomato sauce is on there and maybe it kind of gets into the crust a little bit and makes it spongier or something. But the crust always seems more spongy to me than regular focaccia.
Yes, you are right. And also to a regular pizza. So it's more similar to a focaccia than to a pizza. But as you said, then this kind of tomato sauce, because usually it's strained tomato sauce with it goes really inside the dough. And then that's why it's making this very spongy texture. But you are exactly right. And it's very hard to find in a restaurant or in a supermarket, because it has to be done in the traditional way. Just to give you an example, that in Sicily, when you ask to someone, where are you going to find the best caponata, where are you going to find the best sfincione, you know where? At my home. So because so we have a big tradition to eat at home. So we don't used to go outside so much. Maybe when we have to go with friends and everything, but the big tradition of the Sicilian kitchen, as well as the Napolitan, is with the grandmother cooking. Or mother, or
grandma's kitchen.
Kitchen, yes.
Scott Weiner is a pizza expert who runs Scott's Pizza Tours. He's also written about pizza and is the owner of the Guinness World Record largest pizza box collection. He tells me about why New York-style pizza is impossible to define. How do you define it? Are there certain parameters that you put and you say, this is New York-style pizza and this is not?
Well, I have lots of thoughts about this concept of style, and I've written about it, and I give lectures about style of pizzas. And, the way that we tend to define style is usually not originally defined from within a place. It's usually defined from beyond the place. So, for instance, New York style, it was never a phrase that New Yorkers used. It was really a phrase that was used from beyond, much in the same way that Chicago or New Haven or Detroit, it's always, oh, this is the thing that they do there. it's only recently is it something that's becoming self-defined, which is this is what we do here. And it's there's something about it. It feels inauthentic sometimes for something to be so self-defined, which is why when you ask, like, how do I define New York style pizza? It's a moving target. And I think when most people hear that phrase, they think of it's a movie about New York, a character's eating pizza, and it's always a giant slice hanging off the edge of a paper plate. Mm-hmm. They're eating it while they're walking. They're folding it in half. And so in that sense, New York style pizza is the slice. It's the pizza that you eat on the go because New Yorkers are always in a rush, which is true. And you're in and out of the place within 2 minutes if you want. Whereas the thing that you would think of as Chicago deep dish, for instance, is sort of the antithesis. It's you're here for 45 minutes just waiting.
At least.
You can't stand up while you're eating it. You can't pick it. Which is why so many people want to pit those two styles against each other in some weird way that there might be a battle and a victor. But it's just that they're opposite ways of enjoying similar components. So New York style, I think, is what that phrase really means is that portable, foldable, flexible, chewy yet crisp style. But I also think it's evolving because I've had people come on tours and they say, oh, well, obviously I want to get a dollar slice, which in New York is like a crappy version of the New York slice pizza. Mm-hmm. But in their minds, well, that's what New York is known for. It's these super cheap late night slices. So in some ways, the definition is not controlled by those of us here. It's usually controlled by the perception of people from beyond our borders.
Yeah, it's like in Chicago, we would always make the joke, no one eats deep dish pizza in Chicago unless someone visits from out of town.
Oh, and I love that, Brent, because Chicagoans, in my experience, might end up on a tour or just in conversation, and they will defend what people perceive to be Chicago style, the deep dish and stuff and all this, the thicker stuff, and they'll defend it and they'll say how it's better and it's the best and all this. And then at the end of the argument, they always say, well, we only eat it when tourists are visiting us anyway. So it's this funny thing of like, wait, you were just telling me all that. Now you're saying that you don't eat it?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's so true. So I feel like it's difficult to define New York style pizza as one thing. So maybe it would be useful to kind of talk about the different styles of New York pizza. In other words, what are people doing that is different and interesting in your mind, Scott, when you travel around New York?
Well, do you remember the first time you ever had pizza in New York?
Oh, man. See, I moved to the East Coast in 1990. And so I don't think I'd been to New York before that. So it would have been sometime around 30 years ago. And I can't say I remember the first time specifically, although I'm sure the first time I went to New York, I had a slice of New York pizza.
I'm sure you did, but it's funny because if you're saying, okay, you were here in the 90s, then I think this is kind of how these food definitions work and how this concept of tradition and authenticity and all this is that in the 90s, like that version of New York pizza is what today we think of as like, oh, well, that's the original classic kind of thing. Much in the same way that lots of Italian pasta dishes are very recent, but because they're 1 to 2 generations or 2 to 3 generations old, we think of them as being these ancient, hewn to the earth items. Mm-hmm. But the New York style of pizza pre-1950 was a different pizza altogether. It was the pizza that Neapolitan immigrants brought over in the late 1800s, early 1900s, and where they were used to making pizza in wood-fired ovens incredibly quickly, charred on the edge, but very soft and pliable and flexible. In trying to make that type of product using American ingredients and using not wood, but coal in New York City and using ovens that were designed to burn coal, it just immediately and automatically created a different style. And so the original pizza of New York was this drier, crusty, coal-fired pizza that you can still find in some parts of New York. And in Chicago, I mean, you have a place called Coal Fire, which does excellent coal-fired pizza. And that reference point is this original early half of the 20th century pizza. And that's what happens when you come from your place of origin, you bring the concept of a food, but you don't have, I mean, they were not wealthy people. They did not think, oh, well, obviously we have to import all of our ingredients to make it in an authentic way. Authenticity to them was personal. It wasn't product based. It's, I am authentic. Therefore, what I make is authentic. And that's why all the articles and ads in the little Italian newspapers in the late 1800s for pizzerias in New York all claimed about how this is the taste of home. We are making pizza just like we did in Naples. And since everyone who's reading that was also from Naples, that's what rung true. And even though what they were eating was probably crispier, drier, it must have been different, they still saw it as being authentic, which is why it's so interesting that today we think of the term, on a tour, I'll hear somebody say, I want a real good, traditional, authentic New York pizza. And they're talking about the 1970s, 80s, 90s version, which is the version that happened after the Second World War. The gas-fueled oven, which bakes at a lower temperature than coal and then wood. The low-moisture mozzarella, which is different from the fresh mozzarella that you get in Neapolitan pizza.
Sure.
And more heavily seasoned sauces that are made with American tomatoes, because in the 1940s, we were not importing tomatoes from Italy during wartime.
No.
Which is when the American tomato industry expanded. And that's why what you and I think define as New York pizza is this second wave of pizza in New York, of pizza styles in New York.
So these guys are still around, some of these, I'm using air quotes here, traditional or authentic New York style pizza places, but there has to be a new wave of pizza makers coming through. I'm familiar with a few of them. Tell me about a couple of your favorites. Who's doing innovative new things in New York that you find particularly intriguing or fascinating?
Well, it seems like the common thread among that new wave of pizza makers that are doing something really great in New York right now, and really everywhere, is that they're taking a look at what we always thought was this traditional way of doing things. And, oh, well, in New York, you must do X, Y, Z. And I make it this way because that's the way my father made it. And that's the way we're going to continue. And I'm never going to make a change because I don't want to ruin the traditional aspect and the history of this place. And this new wave is looking back at that and saying, well, why wouldn't I want to make changes? Why were they doing this thing the way that they taught me to do it when there's a better way to do it? And when I'm saying the word better, I just mean maybe more efficient, maybe a better way to coax flavor out of wheat flour. Because I think when you're cooking over generations, using the same methods and the same techniques, but ingredients change. If you decide to buy a different type of flour because it was 3 cents cheaper per bag, and that was 30 years ago, maybe you're still using that. And that's what's changed your product without you really admitting to it. So this new wave is looking at pizza not just as a recipe, but as a formula and as a bread. So when they're approaching pizza, they're not so concerned with, it's got to have a lot of cheese. They're more concerned with the base of the pizza, the dough that I'm making to bake into a crust. That is the most important ingredient. And so this kind of new wave of pizzerias that are popping up all over the country, not just New York, they're realizing that there are no rules, and the chemistry and the physics and the biology of baking are the only rules. And within those, you can actually do way more than you could just by saying, well, I've got to use this exact amount of yeast and a handful of salt and 1 bag of flour. It's, these places are approaching it like a bread. So they're using more water. They're making their dough slower. Mm-hmm. They're putting it together. They're not putting it in a mixer. All the ingredients, hitting the go button, going out for a smoke, and then coming back in 20 minutes to overmixed tough dough. They're treating the dough with respect.
Okay. So interesting. Scott's a great guy, and we're going to have him back on the show in just a couple of weeks. He's just returned from Italy, where he judged a pizza making competition in Naples. What a life. He'll tell us all about that trip. So that's in a couple of weeks. You can reach Scott at scottspizzatours.com. Katie Parla's website is katieparla.com, and Marco's is nicheitaly.com. And I've also got links to all those in the show notes. Well, that's it for this week. Next week, we are in the Venice of Portugal, Aveiro, for boat rides and a crepe named after pig innards. Don't worry, it's delicious. Don't miss that. Until then, I've got lots happening at destinationeatdrink.com. On the blog, I just posted a story about a very divisive drink in Spain. I posted this on my social media, and I've never had so many people say yuck about what I thought was a pretty innocuous beverage. You can read about it at destinationeatdrink.com/blog. And I also just posted a new video. Speaking of Aveiro, this one's about a town right next to Aveiro, Costa Novo. And we climbed to the lighthouse top to see the incredible views, hang out at the beach, and have some pretty amazing street food. You can check that out at destinationeatdrink.com by clicking on the video tab, or by visiting my YouTube channel at Destination Eat Drink 946. And if that's not enough, I also have a Substack page. I just posted a story about living car-free here in Portugal. If you're interested in that, you can read it at destinationeatdrink.substack.com. Thanks for listening. If you want to support Destination Eat Drink further, you can make a one-time or recurring contribution at buymeacoffee.com/Destination Eat Drink. And thank you very, very much. Destination Eat Drink is distributed by the Radio Misfits Podcast Network and Ed Silla. Thanks, Ed. I'm Brent Peterson. I'll see you down the road.
Join us next week for another culinary adventure on Destination Eat Drink, a presentation of the Radio Misfits Podcast Network.